Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Welcome to Bellavecchia, Riley Smith, and Wood Funeral Home. At this time, we will now gather in prayer for the celebration of life of Ted Newell. I'm here to lead us is his brother Cliff, and Cliff, you can second for you now.
First of all, I'd like to say to Vicki how much I'm honored that you asked me to say these words about my brother Ted, and someone that you all have known as well, through Sonia, Joe, Jeff, and Kelly, to the children. We offer our heartfelt condolences. Life and death is quite a paradox in many ways. I'd like to begin by reading a passage that James, the half-brother of our Lord, wrote in James 4:14. He says, "For as you know not whether it shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is as a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away." And though Ted had just celebrated his 79th year on the face of this earth, yet in so many ways it seems such a short and brief period of time. Life is like that. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about why we have funerals and services like this. Say a few things about the shortness of life, and then I want to make a personal tribute to my brother. When we consider the fact that why we have funerals, we do so primarily for two reasons. We want to offer our condolences to the family, friends and loved ones that have known Ted through the years, been in this area for quite some period of time, and was well known in Newell, architect and design, and as well as in Montana, where they have recently built, would you mind if I say a castle? A lodge, but one that was very accommodating. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, he and his brothers and our families met out there, and all of us got to be there except one brother, and we spent a week together. And what a joyous time it was to be able to be with our family and our friends like that. But we want to offer our condolences. We also want to offer our encouragement. The days that lie ahead are going to be greatly challenged. There's going to be the missing, the passing of this one, the memories, the things that you've done together. And so we offer encouragement to do that as well. So when we think about the Bible and what does it teach about the brevity of life, there are so many different illustrations, and I'm not going to use all of those, but I do want to reference just a few of those for us. For example, Job said that life is just so few days. Life is like that. It's full of trouble. He says, we come forth as a flower and we're cut down. And so life is like that. The psalmist proclaimed that in Psalm 90 that life is as a sleep. And do we not all think about, when our day comes and when we leave this earthly scene and this physical machinery is silenced? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all just close our eyes and just go off into sleep, as Ted did? How marvelous that would be. But life is pictured in that very way. Life is also pictured as grass. You know, the green water, the water waters the grass. It turns green, hopefully. And we mow it. And then first thing you know, it comes that time of year when the grass withers and it dries. And we won't see the color of it again until the next spring. So life is oftentimes like that. Or as we read in the words here of James, it's like a vapor. I remember many mornings in the fall, winter of the year, growing up in Michigan, we'd step outside and you'd tail and you'd see that breath, and it's there for a little while and then it just vanishes. It's gone. Life is like that in so many ways. And so these are just a few of the ways in which the Bible depicts life as it is. But more on a personal note, I've listed some things that Ted reminds me of. And I certainly do not mean any disrespect by referring to him as Ted. That's the only thing I've known him as. And I can say that I've known him all of my life. Ted was an idealist. What do we mean by an idealist? He dreamed dreams, and he could see those dreams carried out to their fruition. Why, it wasn't a few years ago on the banks of the Yellowstone River that he and Vicki purchased this plot of ground, and he dreamed a dream of having this cabin, this lodge, as it was there. And sure enough, as time prevailed, he built that. Much of it that he did himself. There were things that he had to have help done with it. But it was all because of a vision that he had. He could dream. He wasn't afraid of dreaming and seeing those dreams come true. In that way, he was a realist or an idealist, and he saw the reality of that. Secondly, I'd like to say that Ted was a very practical man. He was very practical, not afraid to fight, not afraid to be challenged, and if something didn't work out, he'd go back to the drawing board, as he pleased, and he'd work it out. He'd make it work. He'd find a way that all of these things all of these component parts could be put together, and there would be the reality of it. He did not believe in fighting for the impossible, because here was his philosophy. He never thought of any good thing being impossible. And so he always could look forward to the reality of that which would come about. Ted had a rather pioneer spirit. Now, most of us in the East, we think about going west. We remember in the pioneer days, they would make their way as they would come in from the Carolinas and Tennessee and then this part of the world, and then they would make their way going west. They had that pioneering spirit. But it was a conquering disposition with my brother Ted. That's just the way that he was. The word nothing was not in his vocabulary. And that he saw it as a challenge, and he was going to see it through to the very end as to whatever he put his hand to do. In many ways, Ted was a philanthropist. And what I mean by that, he liked to help people. He liked to look and to help those that maybe didn't realize that they had the potential to do this. And sometimes we may look down upon them as the poor, the downtrodden. We may see them in many different ways, but Ted saw as an opportunity, and he was going to do whatever he could to encourage, to help them, so that they could realize their dreams as well. There's so many other things that you could say about Ted. But one thing, he was a conversationalist. And if I might add my own 2 cents, he was a good one. He knew how to communicate. He knew how to talk. He knew how to enlist you and to get you to participate in his conversation as though that you all both had thought of this a long, long time and had worked upon it. And so he was very good at doing that. In some ways, we may not necessarily associate published. And after reading those, it didn't take me long to realize that he had a scholarship about him that was very, very real. And so in his scholarship, he put it to do everything. When you look throughout his house, you would notice that every corner, there wasn't something just cut and patched and put together. It fit the way it was supposed to fit. And that's the way Ted lived his life. That's the way he did his work. There was a perfection about that. Ted was somewhat small in stature. We have pictures of the 7 of us boys as we would be lined up. Ted being the oldest, was down to Robert, my youngest brother, being the youngest. And as I often looked and reflected upon that picture, I'm not a very tall person myself, but I was the tallest one of all my brothers. So I can say that. He was small in stature, but let me tell you something. Though he was small in stature, he was great in every other sense of the word. And please listen carefully. He was every inch a gentleman in all that he did. Whether it was something that he said, the way he relaxed, even got to observe, and we have some CDs of some of his playing days when he had some bands and various Christmas music and various other music. And you can see that he was very much an integral part and put his heart into everything that he did. There may be some other things that Mike could say, but I think I'll just leave those left unsaid. But I love my brother very much, very dear to us. And when they purchased this property out in Montana, at least this was the second occasion, there may have been others that I have forgotten of, but they would invite all of us out, my families, we'd all go out there. And what a time that was spent, because we lived all over, a couple in Pennsylvania, a couple in Michigan, a couple in Kentucky, I lived in South Alabama, and so we were spread all over, and we didn't always get to follow what the other one was doing, what was going on in their lives. So this was a wonderful occasion that brought us together, and we got to talk about and be brought up to date on all of those things that was taking place in our life. So having known Ted as I have, an honor it was to know him as a brother, as a fellow human being, and I am especially grateful to the family that had asked me to say a few words on Ted's behalf. One of the things I'd like to say before I close, and that is, not only do we realize the brevity of life, but as Ted now is, one day we will be, as we now are, he once was. All of us are living our lives, we are paving the roads that one day that we're going to meet our Maker in this life. And so the thing that I would like to caution all of us to think about, to be aware of, to do whatever is amiss in our life that we need to take care of, right? That we're going to stand before our Maker. And we're going to give an account of the deeds done in this body, whether it be good, whether it be bad, whatever it is that we do. And so I hope that you will think seriously, soberly, about the things that, as to where you might spend, where you will choose to spend eternity. There's nothing that I can say or do that will change the state of care. That's all been taken care of. But it is something for us to reflect on and to realize, where am I going in life? And why am I going? May it really have meaning and purpose, as Ted tried to put it into this. Would you bow with me as we go to God in the Lord's prayer? Our wise and loving Father, we are so grateful to Thee for every blessing of life that Thou hast so freely bestowed upon us. We're grateful for associations that we've had in this life, for our friends, loved ones, for family. May Thy richest blessings continue upon all of these, and especially be with Vicki and with the children and the grandchildren and all those that have known Ted, that their hearts may be comforted in the days that lie ahead. We pray, dear Lord, that Thou would bless them and would give them good courage and hope. And we pray that they too would make the preparation that is necessary in their life. But one day, as they go to meet Thee in eternity, that Thou will say unto them, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Forgive us, dear Lord, of our sins and our transgressions, that we might always seek to do Thy will, whatever that may be in our life. Watch over us, bless us now. We pray all in the name of Christ. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. It is quite an honor to have an opportunity to speak on behalf of the Newell family and Ted and his wife and Vicki. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mike Newell. I was a good friend of Ted and also his martial arts instructor. I know him. Probably I met Ted around the time he was around 72, starting in 72 or so. And what I plan to do with all of you is to talk about some of the lessons that I learned from Ted from the time that I spent with him, through experiences that I had and what these small stories and these lessons taught me, and what type of impact this man had on me and therefore will have on many generations because of that and what he's done there before. You know, when I met Ted, and I'm sure I'd met him in previous circumstances because I'd met Sonia first based off her bringing her son Joey to attend martial arts classes with me about 10 years ago. And so I'm sure at that time there was a point where he and I had passed through or we had seen each other. But there was one specific circumstance I found quite extraordinary with Ted. We were doing martial arts classes at ACA's here in Westchester, And there was a room in the downstairs level, because that's the only place we could do karate. And there was no place for parents to sit. And so Ted had come to take Joey to karate class that night. And Joey was inside, and Ted was sitting on the floor outside the room. And I'm a huge fan of having grandparents in my karate classes. They're very nice, right, to sit inside. So I went out and I made a conversation with Ted as he was sitting there. And he looks at me and says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Do you think a guy like me could do something like that?" And I looked at the children on the floor, because they were children, and they're jump kicking and flipping. And I said, "That? No, you cannot do that." And I said, "I can teach you martial arts." And he said, "Okay." So at that point, that's where the curiosity got piqued up. And I was thrilled, because as a young man, to be approached by anybody with the life seniority and experience that he had at that time, not only felt like a great opportunity, it felt like an honor. And so at that point, he'd become quite, attentive to the idea that he wanted to do this. And Sonia had brought him to his first martial arts class, which he did really well with, actually. And from there, he decided to continue to move forward. And the one thing I recognized about Ted immediately was that you had to slowly kind of peel away layers to understand the greatness that was him, because, to him, he is so masterful in so many unit categories that the average individual will never really get to a place where we attain the skill level and mastery of what he did in his life. And so, when I met him, the first thing I started recognizing was that he had this enormous, vibrant curiosity for everything. He was so curious. And I came to know one phrase as I began to work with him. It was either in a group or privately, and he'd always say, "Isn't that simple?" And he would say it all the time to me. I would show him a technique, or we would go through something, or we would have a conversation about something that I'd learned if I had traveled, and he'd want to know about my travels in the martial arts, or things that I would come back and teach him in martial art or Qigong. I would always get that from him. I would get this strong attention to the things that I was saying, and the attention he gave back to me was so sincere, and it was so grounded. And that to me was the very first thing I learned about him, and I came to really appreciate him. What an immediate lesson that is for me, and for how I decided to be a father and a coach and a teacher, is that this vibrant curiosity to do these absolutely brilliant and amazing things. And yet it wasn't a point where Ted said to himself, "Well, it's not enough," or he had never said that to me, like, "Oh, I'm not satisfied." That never came out of him. It was the idea that he knew that he had completed something, and that there was more to that. One time I had an opportunity to be, and I began to, as Ted began to do martial art more, I began to be around a little more. We had traveled to Chicago to see my teacher. We had at one time decided to go to York, Pennsylvania, to train with another teacher. And I had been in communication with all my adult students. We'd all become quite a small group, and like a family almost. And I sent a message out to the group, and I said to them, "I'm going to go to York to train with his teachers, and they're going to come." And nobody can make it. Ted said, "I'll come." Okay, excellent. So Ted and I jump in the car together, and we go up, and we get stuck in horrible traffic for 3.5 hours. It was quite insane for an 1.5 hour drive. Well, the one thing Ted probably didn't recognize about me at that time when we got in the car together is that I love asking questions, and I love asking questions to people who are as interesting as Ted is. And Ted had spent a lot of time after we were training in our martial arts classes sitting on that bench outside of a room, and he would want to listen to everybody. He'd want to talk about their lives, and 2, we would all want to start asking him questions about himself, his time in the Navy, his time as a musician, the things that he had done as an architect, his projects. And so for me, I took that time when I got stuck in traffic with him to ask him a gazillion questions. And it was wonderful. And the one thing I started to gather from him, and again, I say the word mastery, think about the idea of mastering something that doesn't reflect perfection, it reflects mastery, a deep understanding, one that is unknown to that who possesses what he possessed, to have the curiosity, the vision, the dreams that he had, and to be able to see the dreams and put them forth. It was outstanding. And so, of course, knowing me, I knew that he did a lot of like defense contract stuff, and he would rarely want to talk about that. So I really started peeling layers away. Every time, everything he didn't want to kind of say out loud, I would start asking him questions about it. Sure enough, he'd start telling me a lot of stories. And one of the best thing I learned about him as an architect is that, and I think about this too as an educator and a teacher. My senseis, who told me that their senseis before them in Okinawa and in China, have a really simple concept. When you educate an individual, you don't educate based off of what you want to give them. You educate them off of what they need at that time. And Ted's concept in architecture was based in functionality, from what I learned in a short amount of time. He told me stories of many projects that he'd been on, projects of working on labs and different places that he'd go into, and he'd interview people and sit down with the people who were there. And it wasn't about the vision that he had and so much like, I want to build this and I want it to look this way. What I learned from him immediately was that he built everything to function for you, for how you needed it at that time. And then the later projects that he began dreaming up and telling me about were all about how he can improve the human experience, how he can make people function better. And it was brilliant. And there are just not that many people that, as a young man, I believe that on me, that had that kind of a deep impact, that he would build something for you. Not because he saw it, not because he wanted it to look a specific way, but because it had a purpose. When we began talking about Citizens Bank Park, it was all about what he wanted people to experience when they went in. And that was amazing. And so for me, I always had this time where I learned that, for Ted, I looked at all these qualities that I wanted to teach people: leadership and effort, responsibility, courage, tenacity, resilience. And man, oh man, he ticks off every single box in every single way. And that's the type of life that I would love to live. When we were going through everything we've all been here throughout this past year and a half plus, and for many times for all of us, you could probably get online or sit back and talk about or think about how difficult that was. And for a young man who has a family and business owners, anybody else, or whatever you do in your life, everybody experienced some tough times. And sure enough, every single time I would see a picture of him, I would stop back and think about all these journeys and things that he's been through and how much he valued his family. Because when I met him, he had such a grounded energy. And that smile you see on these pictures, throughout every single picture in here, which is so consistent the entire time, it was so reflective. And I had the opportunity to tell my friends and my students, when I met him and I saw that smile, I thought to myself, I wonder what that smile was like when he was younger. And then I saw pictures of him, and I went, it's the same smile. And not only was it the same smile, it was the same energy. It was the energy of what we're talking about now, which is that you can do great things, and it doesn't mean that it has to end. And for him, learning martial art practice was another journey, it was another process. And it's an art, so it spoke truly to his soul, because he's an artist in every single way. And for me, I will cherish that time that I became his friend. I'll cherish the time that he taught me lessons that I will teach my children, and I will teach people moving forward. And for him, I just was always just like taken back by how everybody wanted to be around him. And I was joking in the back with my wife and my friends and students and I told Vicky that he had gone to Chicago and he'd met training partners and seniors from around the country. And every time I would go to these workshops and people would gather in different places in the United States and he wasn't there, and they'd only met him once or twice, they would say, hey, how's Ted? It was the first thing they would say to me, not how are my children, not how are you, not how's life, no, it was, hey, how's Ted doing? He had that kind of an impact on those people, and I've been reached out to in people in the martial art community because in the short time that he did it, he had a deep impact on all of them too, like he did on me. And I was not surprised to see that at all. In the later part of Ted and I having the opportunity to train, Vicky was bringing him to train me privately. And truthfully, I think in some ways, as much as he loved being around people and training with everybody, I truly did enjoy my time privately with him too. And it was an honor to be around him. So, above all else, I want to thank Ted for teaching me a great lesson in dedicating my life to excellence, like he did to his, to continue to seek, to continue to move forward, to continue to have a curiosity behind it, and that it was an honor to know him, it was an honor to teach him, and it is an honor to have said these words about him today. So thank you, Ted, for everything that I've learned from you and that I will teach other people because of you. Thank you.
So I want to thank Vicki and the Newell family for inviting us to say a few words. My name is John Patriarca. I'm a lead partner, training partner with Ted. And let me just start by saying I'm really honored to be here. You all know this. He was such a welcoming, gracious, humble, interesting guy. I can't say this eloquently as Mr. Newell did, but you all know what we're talking about. And like Mike said, I first met Ted about 7 years ago when Mike said to me, hey, there's this gentleman that wants to start training, he wants to get some questions, can you talk to him? I said, sure. He said, John, I've been working out here at ACAC, but I'm watching you guys, and I think I really want to join, you think I can do it? I forgot what I said, but it was something like, Ted, you have to join us, you're going to learn. And he did. He loved it, he joined us, and it suited him very well. I think he loved the physical aspect of it. I was impressed by his strength while I worked out and stuff like that. And I think he liked the intellectual challenge too, because there's a lot to learn about it. It's really deep. And he liked the artistic aspect of it. It was something he could immerse himself in. And just like Mike described, he was very inquisitive. It was great to see him move from stiff and strong to strong and soft and fluid, and watch his pride progress, and watch his mind get concepts and apply principles. And we had a lot of fun too. There was this one exercise that we did occasionally where one partner would just stand there and the other got to have target practice on him, moving around him in a circle. And Ted and I were often partners in class. And we only did that occasionally, but as an impish little brother, sort of, I did that to Ted all the time, without notice, just spontaneously whenever I felt like it. And the great thing about it is he loved it. He had that smile every time I did it, every single time. Randomly I would just start hitting him and punching him, and he would just stand there. Barely containing himself like he was the greatest thing in the world. So that was really good. And of course, some of the other great things. Oh, one time, sorry, when I did that, I probably hit him too hard. I didn't realize it. When I was done, he said to me in the most gracious Ted-like way, John, you caught me. I did. I love that. See his oh gosh, but he didn't. It was nothing. He didn't flinch. He didn't let me out. It was great. But even better than all that was spending time with Ted. After class, we would sit down and decompress and talk, and going on trips with him to Chicago, or sending a weekend seminars, or taking a week long Qigong class. He just loved every aspect of it. And of course, we talked as friends, and eventually he would let out that he was an architect. Turned out he worked on one of the buildings that I worked at for 13 years back in the 80s, so he was influencing me back then. All of the prominent projects he worked on, people that he knew, his publications, his specialty in lab stuff. And then all of a sudden, by the way, I play pedal steel guitar too. Like what? And they sent us music, examples of his music. And of course, this didn't happen right away. It took about 100 conversations in 5 years. Because Ted is super humble, very accomplished, but he doesn't like to brag. So it was always something new with Ted. I used to text my fellow students and say, this guy always impresses me and surprises me. I've never seen a guy like this. And one of our fellow students coined him the most interesting man in the world, just like that Dos Equis commercial.
especially, coming from such different backgrounds, how Ted kind of introduced me to country music, and he was such an amazing pedal steel guitar player. Of course, he made sure that he always had a certain number of George Strait songs that I would do, because that was one of Vicky's favorite parts. So we always worked on them together, and I just found that over the years that I worked with Ted, I just couldn't believe what a talented musician he was, and I was always learning something new just by being around him and experiencing all the different things that he knew musically and just about his life that had a big influence on me. And I guess my biggest regret was that we didn't have an opportunity to play again, because I kept thinking, gee, maybe one of these summers or something we'll have an opportunity to do that. So today the song I'm going to do for you, Ted, is one of his favorite artists. It was Vince Gill, and the song is called Go Rest High on That Mountain. So give it a shot here. Some troubles, and only you could feel the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the rain. So go rest high on that mountain, son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven, go shouting, love for the Father and the Son. We cried the day he left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. Wish I could see the angels' faces when that steel guitar begins to sing. So go rest high on that mountain, son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven,